Hello and welcome to Free Grace International's podcast. I'm here with special guest Frank Carmical. Frank, welcome.
Great to be here.
Yeah, so Frank is an author, and he wrote, I guess I'd like to say a little bit about the book that you wrote that kind of inspired me. I've actually got a copy here, and I have to hold it delicately, but this is a book called The Omega Reunion, and this is a really special book to me because for a lot of years I wanted to write fiction. I had written some fiction. It was about 10, 15 years ago. I had written some fiction, but I wanted to get into writing fiction from kind of a dispensational, very Christian standpoint, but nobody was doing it. And I was talking to a friend one day, and he said, "You've got to read this book called The Omega Reunion." So I got a hold of it. I read it, and I was just like, it was like a green light to me. It's like, wow, somebody's done this. This is a whole thing. So tell us a bit about, first, your inspiration with the book, but also what is the book? What's the concept?
It's great to be here, and I just want to say hello to all of you who are the regulars out there. I went to Dallas Seminary to work on my master's degree, and I had a major in apologetics with Dr. Norman Geisler, who I believe was one of the two greatest apologists, defenders of the Christian faith in the 20th century, the other one being C.S. Lewis. And Dr. Geisler had a lot of Lewis in him, and I have a lot of Lewis in me from having read and loved it. So any of you are C.S. Lewis fans, you will know what we're talking about. But I did all this study, and I thought, well, wouldn't it be great if someone did what like Lewis did with Narnia and with the Space Trilogy, but more up to date?
Okay.
And so I started initially to write a play for my youth group at church. We did a number of dramas that I'd written, and so then I did that with the purpose of I wanted to turn it into a novel or a trilogy of novels. And so I worked on that for a couple of years, finished the seminary, and then I thought, well, is anybody ever going to believe this? Will anybody buy it? Will anybody read it? So I thought, well, hey, why don't I do like an appetizer?
Yeah.
Just a little short version of that. So that's how I did the Omega Reunion.
Yeah.
Just as a trial. I never intended to publish it. And a lot of the folks that I knew, I did hand-printed copy machine like the old days.
Yeah.
And so people liked it, and it fell into the hands of Zane Hodges, who was a professor at Dallas Seminary, and he had his own publishing firm, Redención Viva, and they published it, and it had a life of its own out there. It's been out of print for a number of years, but obviously it affected your life. I think it's affected a number of other people. One friend in particular, I think about a story, young man who said that heaven had never seemed real to him. Eternal state had never seemed like... he believed it. He had no doubts about it, but what would it be like? And after he read my book, he thought, well, wow, it's a real place with real people. Yeah. And so that really encouraged me. And this friend is now with the Lord. He died tragically of cancer a number of years ago, and his widow has remarried, and I still know their family. But so he knows what the real thing is.
Yeah, he knows the real.
But I think one misnomer to actually get into the content of the book, when we as Christians die now before the rapture, we will go to heaven. And I think that when the rapture occurs, we will be taken, based on my beliefs of prophecy. Jesus will return in the air, take us back to heaven, and then we will return with him after the 7 years of tribulation to reign. As he reigns for 1,000 years, we'll reign with him. But then at the end of that 1,000 years, Satan will have a brief... he'll have been in prison for that 1,000 years. He will be released, lead a worldwide rebellion. That rebellion will be crushed by the Lord. Then there'll be the great white throne judgment, and then eternity will start. There will be a new heaven, a new earth. The capital city of that kingdom will be the New Jerusalem. And I believe that that's not just figurative language. I don't think those are just symbols at the end of the book of Revelation, also the end of Isaiah. These are the same terminology, new heaven, new earth. But I think it's a real planet. I think it's the earth remade, recreated. And whether you take the new heaven as the sky, atmosphere around earth, or outer space, or even the heaven where God dwells, it will be renewed. Yeah. So what will life be like when we, as believers now, will be in a glorified body at that time? Our bodies, according to 1 John 3 and a number of passages, we will be like him. Yeah. We will see him, we'll be like him. And so what will that be like for us, looking back on history now, all the mistakes we've made, also the triumphs that we've had in the Lord. So all of that is woven into this book, but in a fictional retelling set 150,000 years after the millennium. And so that's where I went with that.
What I love about this book that it's so personal. It's following an individual character who has her own. She's trying to get somewhere on time. She's got she's a journalist. She's trying to get to a very important place, a very important meeting, and that's kind of the vehicle you use to sort of weave her through the world, where we get to meet some famous characters from history, but we also get to, I think one of my favorite scenes in it is this scene where they're on a spaceship, which you're thinking, wait, what? There's spaceships? It's on a spaceship, and they're flying over, what did you call it, Gehenna?
Right.
And they're kind of having this discussion about what's going on down there, but they're looking up to the new heaven. It's like some of the aspects you love from Star Trek or Star Wars mixed with a future reality. I guess I would call it like potential reality. And when I say potential, I mean we believe it will happen. We don't know exactly what it'll look like, but I think what you've written in this book is a great explanation of the prophetic material we have in Scripture. So maybe talk a little bit about
extrapolation of
that's a good word for it.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about the process of, like, how do you take prophetic material in Scripture and then move it into the narrative? How does that work for you?
Well, I think you've already done that with your book, For the Sake of the King.
Yeah, a little bit.
That's set in the millennium, the 1,000-year reign of Christ. But basically, I started with, what does the Bible teach? What is clear in the Scriptures? And again, from our point of view, that there's this sequence of events: the rapture, the tribulation, the 1,000-year reign called the millennium, then the eternal state, new heaven, new earth, New Jerusalem, starting with that, plus a number of other prophecies, Old Testament and New Testament. Then, as I mentioned earlier, what will we be like as glorified people? Jesus, after his resurrection, he could do things that he did not do before. Yeah. Now, on the Transfiguration, his body and face shined, his clothes shined on the Mount of Transfiguration, but only Peter, James, and John saw that. But then, after he arose from the dead, he could enter a locked room without opening the door. So did he dematerialize on one side, to use sort of sci-fi terminology, and rematerialize on the other side? Did he beam over, to use the Star Trek terminology? But he could still eat. Yeah. He ate fish and a honeycomb. So he had some parts that were like before. He had scars in his body, and that's also a very prominent theme in the Omega Reunion and in the trilogy of novels that I want to write, that the famous phrase that the scars of old Earth are the beauty marks of new Earth.
That's cool.
And so, because again, if like John the Baptist was beheaded, will he still have a scar on his neck? But then it would be a thing of honor rather than a thing of shame. So just beginning to pick up on where the Bible is, and then what would it be like for us to be there, to see Jesus face to face, to see the angels, to see this new earth that's perfect, with no more sea, so there'd be no oceans.
Do you think there'll be lakes?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, lakes, rivers, stuff like that.
And again, in the New Jerusalem and again, so many Christians over the centuries have taken this as all symbolic or figurative, but I think that the New Jerusalem will be a literal city, 1,500 miles each way, whether it's a pyramid or a sphere, we don't know that. Yeah. But it will have the river of water of life. Yeah. It will have the trees of life with leaves that are for the healing of the nations. What does that mean? Yeah. With fruit, 12 kinds of fruit, one for each month, streets of gold, gates of pearl, foundations of precious stones. I take all of that personally, that's going to be a real city with, gigantic pearls, but gold, not like any gold we've ever seen. So the monetary value of that future kingdom will be so different from now, because gold is the most precious metal that we have, and yet it's just a building material there.
It's like asphalt.
And yes, exactly. And diamonds, which are probably the most precious stone we have, are just a foundation to this city. So what would the reality be like if that's it? And what would the food be like? What would the customs? What kind of clothes would they wear? So for the last 40 years, I've been weaving this into this magnum opus.
I was just thinking, magnum opus is probably the word for it.
But again, for the purpose of helping people, all of us Christians, to visualize in a fictional way what that will be like. And then for someone who's not a Christian yet, to perhaps whet their appetite and to say, hey, that's something I might like to be part of. And so and then it's got an apologetic slant to it to defend the faith, because this trilogy of books will answer the questions of why does God allow evil and suffering? Why is there a hell? Is it really possible to know this infinite God that is out there? So, but to answer those through the lives of fictional characters, and yet the answers would be just as valid now for us. So this would be biblically and I hope theologically accurate, but at the same time entertaining and fun. One of the questions that we were talking about a little bit earlier, I was with Lucas, is will this eternal state ever be boring? If we're there for a million years,
I've heard people say that.
Same old, singing praises to God, serving. And so my answer is absolutely not. There'll be so many, planets and star systems and galaxies to explore, and all kinds of animal life and plant life. And will there be extraterrestrial civilizations? Well, I won't go into that part yet, but there'll certainly be so much to do and to see, and all, of course, for the glory of God. And to me, that is why it will not be boring.
Oh, that's really exciting. Well, so you wrote the original, I guess we might call it a novella.
The Omega Reunion.
You wrote that around 85,
1986. 85, 86,
And so you released that then, but the way you're talking, Frank, sounds like you might be working on something new.
That's this project of 40 years.
So for the last 40 years, you've been sort of expanding on the ideas in this. So,
but now I'm hard at work to try to get it published.
Okay. So what is the expanded universe from, like, because there probably are some that have read the Omega Reunion out there that are watching. If they've read Omega Reunion, what development will they see in the trilogy that you're working on? What's
the biggest one would be that if you can think of the mission, those of you who are Trekkers, fans of Star Trek, which is a very visionary series from the 1960s onward, that humankind will get to a point where we will go out to the stars, to the galaxies, and have all kinds of adventures, exploration, colonization. But I would say for the universe that I'm created of, the kingdom of God, can all of that take place for God's glory, to go out to even to the very edge of our known universe, which is the latest Hubble and other telescopic photographs with these super clear photos of stars and galaxies show it's even bigger than we've ever thought it would be. Again, so it's the full kingdom-wide, but also some very personal stories of the 7 main characters, and they will have some adventures along the way. So first book, meeting famous believers of history like Fanny Crosby, who will no longer be blind. And then, but in the second book, taking a journey into hell and meeting infamous unbelievers who will also have lessons to teach. You remember C.S. Lewis did a little novella called The Great Divorce.
Very interesting.
But he did it more like, I think, as a parable, but mine would be much more realistic. And then the final book, the main character, the protagonist, meets a lot of the famous angels of history, not just Michael and Gabriel, but some that we've never known. And so it opens up with some insights from Thomas Aquinas, who did a lot of work on angelology. And then finally, in the final book, he sees God face to face. And so we meet Jesus in book 1, who's king of this universe, but the invisible, triune God the Father, to be able to see that what was called the beatific vision in medieval theology and today too. So that's just a little bit of what would be happening.
I feel like I've heard this over the years, that there'll be people that if I ever start talking about heaven and things to come as if they're real, people don't have a concept of that. Like, especially if we talk about things that are just so mundane for today, like, for instance, what would the economy be like in the kingdom to come, or what would the building materials be like, or how does construction work? Most people just kind of start to feel a little uncomfortable with that because they don't think of their future eternity as this tangible thing. But it feels like you're trying to teach something different. Like, how would you define that?
Well, one of my very close friends who knows a little bit about what this goes on, he sort of sarcastically but also playfully said it sounds like the Amish meets 2001: A Space Odyssey. And so, but good. Again, I mean, we can learn a lot from the Amish because they make their own clothes. They build their own buildings from scratch. They make their own horse-drawn carriages. They don't use motorized vehicles. They don't even use buttons. They don't or snaps. They have I forget what they're called, but to fasten their clothes. So if you lived in this eternal future, why would it be necessary to have a factory to make garments with assembly line anymore? What if all the garments were handmade? And if you took 10 years to make a shirt or a dress, but you made it the very best that you could, what would there be to stop you? And so, and there'll be animals in these books that are friendly and tame, and at least, certainly from our point of view. And so there would not be this tension between humans and animals like there often is now. And so horse-drawn carriages and covered wagons will come back.
That's pretty fun.
And so, or if someone is a potter, to spend 20 years making a vase or vase. Or pot, you could take great pride in your work. Or for someone who's an artist, a composer to compose a symphony, or an artist to paint a painting, or a sculptor to create a sculpture, and to take years to do it, and to really have pride in your work, but no hurry. So those are some of the things that have gone through my mind in creating this future universe.
Yeah, boy, I love that. Yeah, I mean, if you're going to live forever, you could take time with your art. Maybe we wouldn't worry about finishing a manuscript. You just say, hey, maybe it takes 100 years.
That brings up something else. No more printing of books. Just like before the invention of printing in 1440 with the Gutenberg printing press, that all the books will be hand copied.
Wow.
So the beautiful illuminated manuscripts of not just Christian but also Muslims in the Middle Ages, and so a return to that.
Yeah, that's interesting. So it feels like it might fit into a couple of genres when you finish it. It feels like there might be some sci-fi aspects in the galactic universe, but it sounds like there might also be some fantasy elements in a sense.
I would be careful in using fantasy in the sense that I prefer it to be maybe fantastic from our point of view, but I tend to look on fantasy as perhaps like in the bad sense, the werewolves and goblins.
Yeah, so it wouldn't have that.
Vampires, so it wouldn't have those.
Maybe historical or something. I don't know.
But what I would call it is realistic fiction.
Yeah.
That for me, that just because that future kingdom and universe will be real, solid, there will be histories. There will be people living out their lives. So I want to tie it as to reality as much as possible.
Yeah.
With what would the food be like? And so of course here's a very interesting thing: no more meat, because they won't be death.
That, yeah.
And so, certainly for all of you who are vegetarian or vegan, you would say, yay!
Yeah.
But certainly, as we know, with eggplant parmesan, and there's all these wonderful alternatives to meat recipes. Yeah. So I think that cooking could achieve a real... and of course, since Jesus ate in his glorified body, I don't see there's any reason why we could not in our glorified body as well.
Yeah, well, and who knows? Maybe there'll be a high-yield protein plant that's very much like meat for those meat lovers out there.
Exactly, and we're moving that direction anyway in society.
I saw
the meatless burgers and things.
I saw recently that there's a non-meat 3D printer that's printing steaks in, I think it was in Israel actually. It's like this, printer. It's like, wow, I don't know if that counts as vegetarian or not, but well, I'm really excited about this, Frank. I think you're doing something unique. That there's Christian writers out there doing fiction, but very few people working in the future kingdom, either millennial or eternal state, and even fewer who are coming from the perspective that you are, which is that Scripture is to be trusted, and that God really has this tangible plan, and it's not all allegorical. It's so I'm so excited that it's out there, and we're just really looking forward to what you produce next. And I'll say this for those that are watching, this book is a little hard to find. It's the Omega Reunion, but if you can find a copy of this, it's probably been out of print for, I mean, how long?
Many years.
Yeah, but if you, I found this on Amazon. You can find a few. Amazon's algorithm is a little funny. If the supply goes down, the price goes up. And so there's copies that are very expensive out there. I don't want you to think Frank is setting the prices. That's Amazon doing that. But if you can get a copy of that, I would highly suggest it. So, Frank, thanks so much for coming on, and we're looking forward to what you produce, and maybe we'll do it again sometime soon.
Great to be here.
All right, thanks.